Welcome back. In this section we're actually going to deal with cloning away all these dust spots and scratches in the image, of which you'll see there are many indeed. We're actually going to use the spot healing brush tool for this procedure, simply because it's exactly what we need for the job, and it works in such a wonderfully simple way. I'm actually going to clone out all of these spots and scratches on a separate layer, for the simple reason that we're not destroying the original background layer in the process. If we go wrong with a little cloning, we can also always just erase it from the layer, and we can also play with the opacity after the cloning to reduce the effect a little if needed. So on the new layer I want to choose my spot healing brush tool, and we'll choose it from the toolbar there. I'll click in the brush picker and just pick a nice soft brush. Now in the tool options you just need to make sure that we've got proximity match selected, and we also want to make sure that all layers is actually checked, because we're working on a separate floating layer. So with the spot healing brush tool selected, I just want to zoom well into the image so we can see all the tiny individual spots and scratches. Now to use the tool, I'm simply going to increase the size of the brush a little, so it's roughly just a little bigger than the spots we actually want to clone away. To clone away these imperfections, we can simply start brushing over them one by one. Now one thing I would say is this is quite a time-consuming process, but believe me, it's the absolute best way to do it. If you want to make a really good job of restoring an image, don't rely on automatic fixes such as the dust and scratches filter. You really won't beat the good old manual method of simply manually cloning away all these imperfections. It will actually take quite a while to do this, but it's really worth it. And once you begin, you'll actually find it's really quite therapeutic. So to clone away these blemishes, it's literally just a case of brushing over them. Tiny little short dabs, and you'll see they quite literally disappear before your eyes. Now I'm using a pressure sensitive graphics tablet here, and the stylus on this does make this job a lot easier rather than simply clicking with the mouse. Now where we've actually got larger scratches and spots, such as in this area, I can just increase the size of the brush a little, and I can literally just brush over that imperfection to get rid of it. So it's not just spots we can heal with this, it's actually larger scratches. So I'm actually going to leave you for a few minutes to get on with all that cloning. As I say, take your time and make sure we get every one of these tiny little spots. There are a couple of larger scratches in the image that we're actually going to deal with in a rather different way with a different tool, and that's these scratches down here. So don't correct those with the spot healing brush, just concentrate on all these hundreds of smaller areas, and then we're going to come back in the next section of this video and we'll move on a little. So hopefully now you've spent your time carefully cloning away all the little dust spots and tiny scratches, and we've actually got an image here that looks an awful lot cleaner and far better. If you remember, I did say we'd treat these two larger scratches in rather a different way, and for these, because of the size and width of them, we're actually going to use the clone stamp tool. I'll choose that from the toolbar. Again, click in the brush picker and we'll choose a reasonably small soft brush. Remember, we're still working on the separate floating layer here that we did all the previous cloning on. In the tool options, we need to make sure that align is checked, and also again we need to ensure that we've got all layers checked because we're actually cloning onto a separate layer. Now, we use this cloning tool in quite a different way, and to use it what we need to do is locate a similar image area near the actual imperfection that's clear of any spots or scratches, and you'll see that the image, the area right at the side of this scratch is perfect to work from. Just going to increase the size of my brush a little, and I need to set a clone source point, and we do that simply by, with the tool active, holding down the Alt key on the keyboard, and you'll see my tool pointer change into a kind of tiny target symbol, and then I can simply click with the mouse to set the clone source point. Now I can simply begin to carefully, with single clicks, clone over that scratch to make it disappear completely. You see, as I click, that small crosshairs appears at the side of my my tool, and that shows where we're taking the information from to clone with. It's a good idea every now and then to choose a different source point, again by holding down the Alt key and clicking, and we can carry on cloning away. You really end up with some perfectly cloned areas here. If you see any parts like here that look a little odd, again Alt click, choose another source point and simply click over those. Again down here, Alt click, and we'll simply click over that scratch. So that's very easily dealt with, and dealt with very quickly. Again, just going to clone a little around here just so we don't get any repeating patterns going on. Press down my space bar and we can move to the other scratch. We're going to deal with that in exactly the same way. Just increase the size of my tool a little. We've done that via the right facing bracket key on the keyboard. Hold down the Alt key and click to set the cloning source point, and again, and I can simply click away. Let's set another source point there just to get rid of that tiny bit. Again, Alt click. So you can see this is very easily done indeed. Alt click and click to clone away, like so. Again, I'm going to take my source point from that area. I'll simply click over this to disguise it completely. You need a bit of imagination with this technique. You need to work out where are the best places to take your source points from to avoid any repeating patterns appearing. Again, I can just reduce the size of my brush while still using the same tool. Alt click and we'll clone out that tiny bit there. There you go. So by this stage we should have a perfect scratch and dust free image, and in the next section of the tutorial we're actually going to move on to correcting the tonality of the image. Before we do that, you'll remember we cloned onto a separate layer. We can prove that just by hiding that layer temporarily, and we'll see all the original dust and scratches on the image. We want to flatten the image now, so we actually flatten this layer back down to the background before we move on. To do that, we'll go to Layer and Flatten Image. Okay, so we'll return in the next part to deal with actually sorting out the tonality of the image.